pulled the transfer case out and I'm ready to start tearing it down. And I've got all my parts laid out here in the back of the Jeep. I've got new seals and bearings. I've got the Terraflex short shaft kit, and this here is to adapt to the transmission I'm using. New chain. Start tearing this down. We got to get this this piece here off. Once we have that clipped, this should slide right off. Next, we remove this dust shield. I hit it on each side, back and forth with this screwdriver and hammer. Kind of walked it out until it was off the shaft. Next, we have to remove this seal on the inside. Next, we have two snap rings. The larger one keeps the bearing into the tail house, and the smaller one keeps the shaft, or the bearing in the shaft. Holding me up from getting to this last bolt on this other side was the speedometer, well, the speed sensor. This case has two specific prying locations. One is right here. There's a recess in the bottom half of the case, and also right here. Again, there's a recess in the bottom half of the case. And this is the oil pump assembly. Now we should be able to lift the gears right out and set them aside. There's another snap ring on the back of this shaft that we're going to have to take out to take this gear out. Once the snap ring is removed, it's time to put these bearings, these gears onto the new shorter shaft. Alright, I've moved everything inside here and continue on breaking this down so I can get into the front bearings and all that. And I keep disassembling. And this is a box parts. And then we got to take these shift range selectors and synchros and whatnot out. This just slides right on up through here. This just kind of slides out of that groove. Now with the case over, we take out the 4 bolts that hold the main input bearing seal. Like with the cases, we have a specific prying point right here, and you can see it's right here. Next we'll remove that snap ring. Once the snap ring is removed, which you should do on the side, you can slide these planetary gears right out. The next step is to get the snap ring off the planetary gears. And this is a little easier because they've got these little holes here. You just put a screwdriver in here and pry the snap ring out. Now I'm going to need 2 hands to do this. Oh, I guess not. So the snap ring out, we can lift this up, but before we do that, I'm going to put some zip ties on here so I keep these gears all meshed up, you know, synchronized when we pull this out so they don't move on me, and it's easier to put this all back together. And before I go any further, I want to say that the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm changing from a 21 spline to a 23 spline. Now, supplied in my rebuild kit, I have two plastic thrush washers. One is located down here. This is the new one. And the other one is behind this washer. And when we lower this in here, I'll be nice and careful not to move any of our planetary gears. There we go. Nice and easy. And we are ready to put the snap ring back on. Should also mention that supplied in the kit, there is a input gear pilot bushing for the main shaft. You know, for the end of here. But it sits in there, but it's already supplied and installed with the new input gear. Alright, I have the front bearing retainer here, and I've pressed the seal out, and the new seal, right here, I'm going to press that in. Look at the difference. My book calls, well, printout, calls for a 1/8 inch bead of RTV around here. On the oil pump, we have this little O-ring in here. Pop that out. Take our new one. Put that in there. And we also have this seal on the top. Next, I'm going to knock this seal out on the front output bearing. After the seal is removed, there's a snap ring to pull out of there. Then we can turn it over and just knock it out with a mallet. After the new bearing and bearing seal is put into the output shaft front, it's time to take out the bearing seal, or excuse me, the bearing for the main input. Once the main input bearing is in place and the snap ring is on, you can, what I did was I lubed up my planetary gears with some ATF fluid just so nothing runs dry. Putting it down in here. So we're putting a little bit of black RTV on the front bearing retainer. You want to make sure your little detent lines up with your oil port. And these are 16 foot-pounds. After torquing down the bolts on the front input bearing retainer, I took the shift lever assembly, whatever you want to call it, out, and the sensors and the detents, and I replaced all the O-rings in those. Now I'm starting to put in the range selectors. And you can replace these. I'm not going to replace these because they look to be in really good shape, and I think these are probably better quality than the replacement ones I have. Spin it down into here. Then this goes in here to the top. This is the magnet that goes on the front half of the case. Clean all the old debris off it. Stick her back in there. Make sure it's clean. The next step is to put your main shaft in. Just gotta make sure it goes in all lined up with everything. Next, we install the front output shaft and the chain. In the manual it says pull the main shaft up a little bit, get everything to line up. Alright, unfortunately I'm out of black RTV, but I'm going to show you how this assembles so I can get this video done. Tomorrow I'll get some RTV and finish putting it together. But your dipstick tube and strainer in place. I replaced the O-ring in here, and this kind of goes on the back side here. That's getting heavier with all that stuff in there. And you gotta try to line this up with the splines and the shaft. There we go. Alright, these bolts will be torqued down to 30 foot-pounds, and remember where the bolts with washers come from, because they go on the 2 holes that had your alignment dowel pins. Alright, now before you put this tailpiece on, you're going to want to look at this and make sure this doesn't, when you shift it through the I don't want to say gears, would it be ranges? Make sure you don't bottom out inside here. I forget what the measurement is. It'll be in the literature if you're doing one of these Terraflex kits. After you put your speed sensor ring in place, you want to take your output shaft housing and put that on. Alright, putting the rear, or well, the front output yoke back on. Pretty simple. Also a little rubber washer here. Funny looking guy. And you slide that rubber up in there, and you want to get it meshed up with the splines. I guess you could just do that first. No, I guess not. But anyway, you get that guy in there, meshed up with the splines real good, and you torque it down to 110 foot-pounds. This is the Terraflex speed sensor. This goes right in here, and with the supplied hardware it says torque it down to about 7 foot-pounds so you don't damage the sensor. New yoke for the output shaft goes right in here. Get that seated down in there good. In the Terraflex installation guide, they say to bolt this, or excuse me, torque this to 180 foot-pounds. And also, I don't think I mentioned, but you're going to also want to put silicone, RTV sealing behind here before you bolt it all together. And that's pretty much about it, other than obviously fill it full of fluid.
What's up?
What's up?